6-year-old Malachi Rivers sat in a small neighborhood bookstore cafe, swinging his legs under a chair that was far too big for him. His curious brown eyes were fixed on a tall man across the room. The man had been watching them for almost 5 minutes. Not casually. Not by accident. He was staring. The boy's voice cut through the silence. "Mom, why is that man staring at you?" Nyara Rivers froze. For 7 years, she had built a quiet life to make sure this moment would never happen. But now it had. Because the man staring at her was not just any stranger. He was Sung Jae Kang. One of the most feared Korean crime bosses operating between Seoul, Los Angeles, and New York. And he was staring at a boy who had his eyes. In one moment, a normal life turns dangerous. Trust is tested, and a father meets the son he never knew he had. Secrets start to come out. Loyalties begin to break. And one decision could mean life, or death. Before the story continues, take 1 second to subscribe. Every story on this channel takes hours to write and create, and many people watch without ever supporting the channel. If you enjoy stories like this, please subscribe. It really helps the channel keep going. Now, let's continue the story. The boy's voice cut through the cafe like a blade through silk. "Mom, why is that man staring at you?" 8 words. His voice was clear. Honest. Innocent. And devastating. Loud enough for the elderly couple 3 tables over to look up from their crossword puzzle. Nyara Rivers did not move. She stopped breathing for a second. Her fingers, wrapped around a warm paper cup, went completely still, and the coffee inside it trembled before she did. Every nerve in her body had just fired at once. Because she already knew. Before she turned. Before she looked. Before her eyes confirmed what her bones had already screamed at her, she knew exactly who was standing near the entrance of this small Westchester County bookstore cafe on a quiet Tuesday afternoon in October. She turned anyway. And there he was. Sung Jae Kang. Standing near the door. Still. Silent. Dressed in a dark charcoal coat that fell to his knees, his hands relaxed at his sides, the posture of a man who had never once in his life felt the need to rush. The soft jazz humming through the cafe's speakers suddenly felt obscene against the weight of his presence. He wasn't scanning the room. He wasn't looking at the menu board above the counter. He wasn't checking his phone. He was looking directly at her. Not casually. Not accidentally. Not the way strangers sometimes glance at each other across a quiet room. He was staring. The barista behind the counter, a college-aged girl with a streak of blue in her hair, had stopped foaming milk. She hadn't noticed she'd stopped. She was just standing there, holding the wand in midair, watching the man near the door the way people watch something they can't quite name. The elderly man with the crossword had set his pen down. A woman in a yellow cardigan near the window had gone very quiet mid-sentence. Nobody in the cafe knew why the room felt different. They only knew it did. Nyara knew exactly why. She had spent 7 years building a life specifically designed to never produce this moment. 7 years in a city that had nothing to do with Los Angeles. 7 years under a name no one from that world would search. 7 years of ordinary jobs, ordinary routines, and ordinary silence, all of it constructed around one single purpose. To make sure this man never found her. And yet here he stood. In a bookstore cafe in Westchester County, New York. 30 feet away from her. And 30 feet away from a 6-year-old boy with his exact jawline. Malachi had swung back around in his chair and was now watching his mother's face with the kind of sharp attention children develop when they sense their parents are hiding something. His small brow furrowed. "Mom. You're not answering." Nyara opened her mouth. Nothing came out. "If you had hidden a child for 7 years to protect him, would you tell the truth now? Right now, in this moment, with nowhere to run. Before we proceed, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is, because what happens in the next few minutes is going to change everything you thought you knew about this story. Nyara set down her coffee cup. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the table. Sung Jae had not moved from the doorway. He was still watching her with an expression she could not fully read, and that was what frightened her most. She had always been able to read him. 7 years ago, she had learned his silences the way sailors learn weather. The tight jaw meant controlled anger. The slow blink meant he was calculating. The stillness, this stillness, the absolute, practiced stillness, meant he had already made a decision that the rest of the room hadn't caught up to yet. He had already decided something. She just didn't know what. What she did know was this: the real danger in this room was not whatever decision Sung Jae Kong had just made. The real danger was the people who had tried to bury her 7 years ago, people who still believed they had succeeded. People who, if they learned she was alive, would not send a warning. They would simply finish what they started. And those people moved in the same world as the man now walking toward her. Slow. Measured. Each step quiet on the hardwood floor. A woman near the pastry display stepped sideways without realizing it, creating space she hadn't intended to give. A man by the magazine rack turned slightly, unconsciously angling away from the path Sung Jae was cutting through the room. People always moved for him. They never understood why. Malachi watched the tall man approach with wide, curious eyes. Then, with the complete fearlessness that only belongs to children, he raised one small hand and waved. Sung Jae stopped. He looked at the boy. Something passed across his face, fast, barely visible, gone before it could be named. Then he looked at Nyara. Then back at the boy. His eyes moved the way a man's eyes move when a number he has been running in his head for years suddenly produces an answer he wasn't prepared for. He stepped up to the table. He said nothing. For 3 full seconds, the cafe held its breath. Then Malachi looked straight up at him and asked, with the calm confidence of a child who had never once been taught to fear the world. "Do you know my mom?" Sung Jae's jaw tightened. His gaze moved from the boy, slowly, deliberately, to Nyara. And in a voice so low only she could hear it, he said one word. One word that had not left his mouth in 7 years. Nyara. Her name sounded like something he had kept locked in a room inside himself, and the door had just broken open. Subscribe to see how this unfolds, and comment where you're watching from. I would love to say hello and know just how far our story is reaching. The black SUV didn't slow down before it hit the curb. It jumped it. All 4 tires, full speed, scraping concrete hard enough to leave a scar on the Beverly Hills pavement before skidding sideways into the private clinic's rear parking lot at 11:47 on a Wednesday night. Nyara Rivers heard the tires first. She was 3 hours into a double shift, charting medication logs at the back desk, her 3rd cup of coffee going cold beside her elbow. The clinic was empty. It was always empty at this hour. That was the point of a private after-hours facility tucked 2 blocks off Wilshire Boulevard. Discretion was the product. Silence was the service. The back door blew open before she could stand. 4 men came through it, big, moving fast, moving together the way men move when they have done this before. They were carrying a 5th. "He's been shot," the one in front said. Not a question. Not a plea. A statement of fact delivered the way someone reads a weather report. "Fix him." The man they were carrying was unconscious. His white dress shirt had gone almost entirely red from the collar down. He was tall, broad across the shoulders, and his head hung at the angle of someone whose body had simply stopped cooperating. They laid him on the treatment table, and the overhead light caught his face. Sharp features. Dark hair soaked with sweat. A jaw set hard even in unconsciousness, like his body refused to look weak even when it had no choice. Nyara was already moving. She had pulled on gloves before they finished setting him down. Her training didn't ask her heart rate for permission. Her hands found the wound, assessed the entry point, reached for the tray. "How long ago?" she asked without looking up. 20 minutes. "Anyone call 911? Silence. She already knew the answer. She didn't ask again. The four men spread out across the room without being told, one near the door, one by the window, one beside the table watching her hands with eyes that had no warmth in them. The fourth stood slightly behind the others, and Nyara caught something in his posture. He wasn't guarding the room. He was guarding the man on the table. There was a difference, and she felt it. She worked fast. The bullet had missed the lung by less than 2 inches. She packed the wound, got a line in, monitored his pressure as it climbed back towards something that looked survivable. The room smelled of iron and gun oil and the faint trace of a cologne too expensive to name. It was while cutting away the rest of the shirt that she saw it. Left side, beneath the ribs. A tattoo, black ink, precise as calligraphy. A tiger mid-leap, its body coiled around a vertical column of Korean characters. The lines were old enough to have settled into the skin but sharp enough that whoever had drawn them had done it with intention. She didn't pause. She didn't react. But the man nearest the table had seen her eyes move. He said something in Korean, low, flat, directed at the one by the door. The one by the door looked at Nyara and said nothing. She kept her hands moving. Clean the field. Close the wound. Do the job. She was sealing the last suture when the man on the table opened his eyes. It happened without warning. No gradual flutter, no slow return. One moment he was under. The next, his eyes were open and fixed directly on her face with a clarity that had no business existing in a man who had just lost that much blood. She didn't flinch. She held his gaze for exactly 1 second and said, "You'll live." Then she looked back at her work. He didn't speak. He didn't move. But something shifted in the room the moment those 2 words left her mouth. She felt it the way you feel a change in air pressure before a storm. The men around the table became slightly less rigid. As if her certainty had granted permission for the tension to drop 1 degree. She stepped back, stripped her gloves, and began charting exactly what she had done and exactly what she had used. Standard procedure. Her hands did not shake. The men collected themselves. The one nearest the table said something to the others. The unconscious man, now merely sedated, was moved with the same efficiency with which he'd arrived. They were gone in 4 minutes. No names. No explanations. No thank you. Just the sound of tires on pavement again, fading east toward the 405. Nyara stood alone in the treatment room. She looked at the red-soaked gauze in the waste bin. At the suture packaging on the tray. At the faint bloodstain on the edge of the table that the men hadn't noticed in their rush. Then she finished her chart, washed her hands, and poured out her cold coffee. She told herself she would forget about it by morning. She was wrong. 3 weeks later, at 2 in the afternoon on a Thursday, the back door of the clinic opened again. This time, no one was bleeding. He walked in alone. Same dark coat, different shirt, cream this time, open at the collar, no tie. The posture she recognized instantly. That particular stillness. The way he occupied space without appearing to take up too much of it, which somehow made him seem larger than the room. He looked at Nyara across the empty reception area. No urgency. No performance. "You saved my life," he said. His English was precise, carrying the soft edge of a Seoul accent that had been worn smooth by years of international boardrooms and late negotiations. Nyara didn't look up from the file she was holding. I did my job. Most people would have panicked. Most people haven't worked a trauma shift at County USC. He was quiet for a moment. She finally looked at him. He was studying her the way a person studies something they cannot immediately categorize, not with suspicion, but with the focused attention of someone who rarely encounters things that surprise them. I want to compensate you, he said. The clinic has a billing department. Something moved in his expression. Not quite a smile. The suggestion of one. That's not what I meant. I know what you meant. She set the file down. I didn't treat you for a reward. I treated you because you were on my table and you needed stitching. That's all it was. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Turned. Walked toward the door. Nyara watched him go and told herself, again, that it was over. Before he reached the door, he stopped. His back still to her, he said something quietly, in Korean. To the air, it seemed. Because there was no one else in the room. But when she looked toward the window, she caught the shadow of a figure outside that she hadn't noticed before. Someone had been there the whole time. And as the shadow moved away, Nyara felt the first cold thread of something she couldn't name pull itself loose inside her chest. Most people run from men like that. Would you have stayed to find out why he came back? Subscribe before the truth gets dangerous, because what happened next was never supposed to happen at all. He came back on a Tuesday. Not for treatment. Not with an explanation. He simply walked in during the last hour of her shift, sat down in the chair beside the small desk in the back office where she filed discharge paperwork, and said, "Tell me how you ended up in Beverly Hills on a night shift salary." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a compliment. It was curiosity. Unguarded. The kind that can only come from someone who had spent so long surrounded by people performing emotions that a real one had become foreign to him. Nyara looked at him over the stack of files and said, "Tell me why a man like you cares." He almost smiled. "A man like me. You know what you are." "Yes," he said simply. "I do." That was the first conversation. It lasted 40 minutes. They did not exchange phone numbers. They did not agree to meet again. He left when a staff member came through the back hallway, and he left the way smoke leaves a room, gradually, without announcement. He was back the following Thursday. And the Thursday after that. By the fourth week, Nyara stopped pretending she was surprised. Their meetings moved from the clinic to the outside world, slowly, the way trust moves when both people know it could be a mistake. A coffee at a quiet Koreatown spot on 6th Street. Then dinner at a small Thai restaurant in Silver Lake with no valet, no velvet rope, and no one looking twice at anyone. He never took her anywhere that required a reservation in his name. She noticed that, and she didn't ask why. He talked carefully at first. Partial sentences. Fragments. His father had been killed when Sung-jae was 23. Shot at a dinner in Busan that was supposed to be a peace agreement. He said it without flinching, the way people describe weather events, something that happened to the landscape of his life, not a wound he was still carrying. But his right hand tightened around his glass when he said it, and Nyara saw that. She did not point it out. The Kong family, he told her, not with pride, not with apology, controlled container shipping through 3 Pacific ports. Long Beach. Oakland. Incheon. The kind of volume that moved quietly because it moved alongside legitimate cargo. Alongside luxury real estate in Koreatown, Hancock Park, and a cluster of newly developed mixed-use buildings near downtown Los Angeles that bore the name of a shell corporation she would never find if she searched for it. His world ran on infrastructure. On the parts of commerce that nobody photographed for magazine covers. "Does it bother you?" she asked once. "What you run?" He was quiet for a moment. Does it bother you that hospitals let people die over insurance? She didn't answer. Neither did he. That was how they talked, around the sharp edges of things, circling the truth without quite touching it. And slowly, Nyara stopped looking at the door when they sat together. Stopped calculating exit routes. Stopped waiting for the version of him that matched the rumors. He was not soft. She never confused him for that. But there was something beneath the control, a stillness that was not cold. Something that watched the world with the patience of someone who had seen too much too early and had decided, somewhere along the way, to feel things fully only in private. He was gentle with her in ways so quiet she almost missed them. He noticed when she was tired before she said it. He never pushed a conversation past where she wanted to take it. Once, when a car backfired on the street outside the restaurant and her whole body seized up, he said nothing. He just waited. And when she steadied, he continued talking about something else entirely, as if her fear had been a private moment he had no right to enter. She had not expected that. She had not expected any of it. The night she told him about the pregnancy, she had planned to do it at the restaurant. Neutral ground. Public enough that emotion couldn't fill up all the air in the room. Instead she found herself saying it on the sand outside Malibu, just north of Point Dumais, where the Pacific Coast Highway noise faded and the ocean was loud enough to fill the silence between words. "I'm pregnant," she said. The wind came off the water. The waves broke white in the dark. Sung Jae stood very still. She watched him the way you watch a structure that might hold or might not. Then something happened to his face that she had never seen before. Not relief. Not calculation. Not the controlled readjustment of a man deciding what position to take. It was something open. Unguarded. Real. He looked out at the water for a long moment. Then he said, quietly, "My son." Not a question. A declaration. Like he had already decided, in those few seconds, exactly who this child was going to be to him. Nyara felt something in her chest loosen, some tension she had been holding so long she'd stopped noticing it. For the first time in as long as she could remember, she let herself believe that something was going to be all right. Would you have trusted him in that moment? A man with that much power and that many enemies, holding something as fragile as hope. That peace lasted exactly 19 days. Because 3,000 miles of ocean and concrete away, in a glass-walled office above Koreatown, a man named Dae-hyun Kong sat across from one of his lieutenants and listened to a report he had not asked for but had been expecting. Sung Jae had a woman. The woman was pregnant. Dae-hyun said nothing when he heard it. He set down his pen with the care of someone who does not waste movements. He looked out the window at the city grid below, all that light, all that money, all that structure that his cousin controlled and he did not. An heir changed everything. A son gave Sung Jae something he had never had before. A reason that had nothing to do with power. And men with reasons beyond power were either the most dangerous men alive, or the most vulnerable. Dae-hyun picked his pen back up and drew a slow, deliberate circle on the paper in front of him. He was still deciding which one his cousin was going to be. He would have his answer soon enough. The door came off its hinges at 2:09 in the morning. No knock. No warning. Just the crack of a frame splitting and 4 men moving through Nyara's Inglewood apartment with the certainty of people given an address and a job. She was already awake. She didn't know why, instinct, maybe, or the way a building goes completely silent right before something breaks it, but she was sitting up when the living room wall shuddered, and on her feet before the bedroom door had time to move. She did not scream. She grabbed the go bag from under the bed. She had packed it 3 weeks earlier, the night she came home from Malibu, and understood, with the cold clarity that follows a moment of real happiness, that she was now a target. That carrying Sung Jae Kang's child had made her something she never intended to become. Leverage. The fire escape window was already unlatched. She had done that the same night she packed the bag, 2 weeks before she let herself believe she would ever actually need it. She went through it as the men reached the bedroom. October air hit her face hard. For flights of iron grating, bare feet finding each step by memory, the noise of Crenshaw Boulevard rising indifferent from below. The alley smelled of motor oil and wet concrete, and the only sound that acknowledged she was there was a dog barking 3 blocks over. She dropped the last 6 feet and hit the ground on both palms and one knee. Felt the skin split open. Ran anyway. 2 blocks east, pressed between a laundromat and a shut beauty supply store, a black car pulled to the curb beside her. The window came down. Jun-Ho Park leaned across the passenger seat, eyes already moving past her to scan the street behind. Get in. Now. She knew Jun-Ho. Sung-jae's shadow, a man who said little and saw everything. She had never fully decided whether to trust him. That decision was gone now. She got in. He drove south. She pressed her bleeding palms flat against her jeans and watched the mirror and said nothing until the 105 overpass swallowed the Inglewood lights behind them and the city began to thin. Was that Sung-jae? His jaw tightened. No. Then who? He didn't answer until he pulled onto a dead-end road near San Pedro, dark water on their right, engine cut. He turned to face her. Dae-hyun, he said. She had heard that name once, spoken the way Sung-jae spoke things he had already decided to handle later. A cousin. Quiet. Patient. Watching. Why? She asked, though her body had already answered. Because you're carrying an heir. Jun-Ho held her gaze steadily. An heir threatens anyone waiting for position. Dae-hyun can't move against Sung-jae directly. Not yet. So he takes away the thing that made Sung-jae human. Does Sung-jae know I got out? Jun-Ho was quiet 1 second too long. Tell me. He was told you didn't make it. Dae-hyun's people reached the report first. No survivor. He paused. It broke something in him. That's exactly what Dae-hyun needed, a man drowning in grief stops thinking clearly. He makes errors. Nyara's hand moved to her stomach before she decided to move it. If he finds out I'm alive. 48 hours. He has eyes at every level of the organization. And the baby? If they know the child exists, they'll use it. Both of you. Not fast, patiently. The way Dae-hyun does everything. He looked at her. The only way that child is safe is if this world never learns he was born. What would you choose, if that was your only option? Love, or your child's life? Stay subscribed. Because this truth changes everything that comes after it. Nyara opened her eyes. She looked at the bag in her lap. Her torn hands. The city glow on the horizon that had been her home 3 hours ago. Where do I go? Far, Jun-Ho said. Different. New name, new city. Nothing tied to Los Angeles. And Sung-jae? Let him believe it. The silence that followed was the heaviest thing she had ever held. She nodded once. The smallest motion. It cost her everything attached to it. Jun-Ho drove her to a motel off the I-10 near Pomona. He gave her an envelope, cash, a prepaid phone, a handwritten address in Phoenix for a woman who helped people start over without a paper trail. No explanation. She asked for none. At the door he stopped. He loved you, Jun-Ho said. Not kindness. Just a fact he needed to set down before he walked away. I want you to know that. She stepped inside. Closed the door. Sat in the dark on the edge of the bed and pressed both hands flat against her stomach. She did not make a sound. Because somewhere across Los Angeles, the man who had set my son on a beach in Malibu was being told she was gone. And she was going to let him believe it. For as long as it took to keep their son alive. 7 years is not a number. It is a practice. Every morning. Every locked door. Every quiet, ordinary choice made to stay invisible inside a life that looked like nothing worth watching. Nyara arrived in Westchester County on a gray February morning, a duffel bag, $4,000 cash, and a last name she pulled off a map. Rivers. She liked that it moved. That it didn't look back. She found an apartment on a side street off Central Avenue in White Plains. The kind of building where the hallway carpet had once been burgundy. Where the radiator knocked at 3 in the morning. Where neighbors kept to themselves because they had their own reasons to. She took a job doing intake at a walk-in clinic on Mamaroneck Avenue. Steady hours. Unremarkable work. Nobody looked twice at a woman who came in early and left without lingering. Malachi arrived in September. Alone. A nurse named Petra held her hand through the final hour without asking why no one else was there. She named him Malachi because it meant messenger. Because even in that motel room in Pomona, stripped of everything, she believed his life was going to say something that mattered. She didn't know what yet. She raised him on library books and Saturday cartoons and the quiet discipline of a woman who understood that safety was not a feeling, it was a decision made over and over. She checked the locks twice every night. Memorized the regular faces on her block. Noticed any car parked more than 2 days without moving. She kept the blinds angled so she could see out but no one could easily see in. She chose the bookstore cafe on Court Street because it had 2 exits, clean sightlines, and an owner who knew her name. Careful. Permanently, quietly, exhaustingly careful. And Malachi grew. Sharp. Curious. Fearless the way children are when they have never been given a reason to be afraid. He made friends fast, held grudges for about 4 minutes, and asked questions about everything with a directness that made his teachers want to answer him fully. He asked about his father at age 4. Nyara told him it was someone from a long time ago. That life had carried them different ways. She said it the same way every time, level, calm, unchanged, until the answer became a wall that Malachi had learned, without being told, not to lean against too hard. He was too sharp not to notice she was afraid of that question. He was too kind to say so. Across the country and an ocean, Sung Jae Kong was becoming something colder. The grief had not broken him. It had sealed him shut. Whatever had briefly been open during those months with Nyara had hardened into something more precise and far more dangerous than what he had been before. 3 men left his organization in the first 6 months. Quietly. Permanently. Men whose loyalty he had never fully confirmed. After Nyara, he stopped extending that benefit to anyone. He expanded. Shipping agreements through Long Beach. A holding company in Delaware quietly picking up properties in Greenwich and Palm Beach over 3 years. His name appeared on nothing. It never did. But his weight was felt in the way rooms shifted when he entered them, even rooms where no one said his name. He was building walls. The kind designed to make sure nothing could reach him the way she once had. It almost worked. Except for the investigation he could not let go of. For 3 years, working entirely outside the formal organization, he had been pulling apart the night Nyara died. The report had always sat wrong, too clean, too finished. The kind of smooth that comes from editing, not from things actually being simple. Small things. A timeline gap. A witness report filed without a name. 40 missing minutes in the movements of 2 men who arrived first at the scene. He kept following it. The trail led somewhere. Every time he got close it went cold, not a dead end. Frozen deliberately. Someone inside was keeping something buried. He just hadn't confirmed who yet. On a Tuesday morning in October, Nyara helped Malachi into his jacket and told him they could stop at the bookstore cafe before errands. He said yes before she finished. He always said yes to the cafe. They arrived at 10:30. Hot chocolate for Malachi. Medium drip for Nyara. A blueberry scone to split. Their usual table near the window. Quiet inside. Warm. The kind of morning that asks nothing. Malachi was stacking sugar packets into a small fortress when the bell above the cafe door chimed. Nyara reached for her coffee. She felt the shift before she looked, that specific change in a room's silence she had not felt in 7 years. Her hand stopped. Because the man standing in the doorway of that small bookstore cafe in White Plains, New York, on a Tuesday morning, was Sung Jae Kong. And he was already looking directly at her. Time did not slow. It stopped. Nyara's coffee cup froze halfway to her mouth. The cafe moved around her, espresso machine, jazz, the low murmur of the man with the newspaper, but all of it had gone to the edges. There was only the doorway. The man inside it. 7 years had changed him the way cold changes iron. Leaner in the face. Harder at the jaw. Charcoal coat, open collar, that particular stillness she recognized the way you recognize a sound you spent years trying to stop hearing. His eyes found her without searching. Like she had been the first thing the room offered him. Malachi looked up from his sugar packet fortress. Mom. He's still staring. Nyara set her cup down. Sung Jae crossed the room. Controlled. Measured. People stepped aside without realizing it. The barista stopped mid-sentence. He reached the table. Stopped. He looked at Nyara for 3 full seconds. Then he looked at Malachi. Something moved through him, deep, structural, silent. The way a fracture moves through ice before the sound arrives. His eyes tracked the boy's face with the focused attention of someone reading something they already understand. The jawline. The direct gaze. The slight forward tilt of the head that Nyara had watched Sung Jae himself use 100 times. Malachi looked back without flinching. Hi, the boy said. Sung Jae lowered himself to one knee on the hardwood floor, eye level with the child. What's your name? Malachi. What's yours? Sung Jae. The boy tried it silently. That sounds serious. Sung Jae looked up at Nyara. Whatever had briefly opened in his face closed again, replaced by something that was not anger but lived directly in front of it. Is he mine? Nyara looked at the man kneeling before her son. At the 7 years of grief and investigation and unanswered questions behind his eyes. At the precise way he was holding himself together. She had rehearsed this. Dozens of times. The right words, the right framing, the reasonable explanation for impossible choices. Every version of it left her now. Yes. It landed like something dropped from a great height. Sung Jae went still. Malachi, entirely unbothered, reached forward and tapped Sung Jae's arm. Do you want some scone? My mom says I have to share. Sung Jae looked at the boy's hand on his arm for a long moment. Thank you, he said quietly. What would you do, if 7 years had been taken from you by someone wearing the face of family? Sung Jae stood. Hands at his sides. Looking at Nyara with the controlled calm of a man who knows that reacting too early is the most dangerous mistake you can make. You were alive. The whole time. Yes. His jaw tightened. Someone lied to me. Someone inside my house. He held her gaze. Who helped you disappear? She understood the full shape of the question. The name she was holding would not just answer something. It would start something that could not be contained. She looked at Malachi, rebuilding his fortress, humming quietly, completely at peace. She looked back. Sung Jae was already reading her face the way a man reads a face when he doesn't need the answer, only the confirmation. He already knew. 3 years of following a frozen trail. The gaps in the report. The missing 40 minutes. He had not come to White Plains by accident. She had been the last piece. Not the discovery. Quietly, Dae-hyun. Not a question. Her silence confirmed it. He straightened. Adjusted his coat with the unhurried motion of a man closing a long case. He looked at Malachi one last time. The boy looked up and waved, easy, fearless, entirely at home. He stays safe. Low. Absolute. That is not negotiable. He placed a card face down beside her cup. A phone number, handwritten. Nothing else. The bell above the door chimed once as he stepped back into October. Nyara sat still. Malachi held out the card. Mom. Is he coming back? She took it. 7 years of double-locked doors and careful mornings and a secret she believed would hold. And now a handwritten number. Somewhere in Seoul, Dae-hyun Kong sat in a meeting, still building, still moving, still operating on the assumption that the lie he planted 7 years ago was holding. Still believing the seat he had been quietly moving toward was his. He had no idea. Sung Jae Kong had spent 7 years fighting for power. He was about to become something the empire had never faced. A father who had been lied to. The Kong Empire had been still for 7 years. It was waking up now. Not for a throne. For a boy who shared scones with strangers and had never once been taught to be afraid. If this story moved you, subscribe now and turn on your notifications. You will not want to miss what comes next. Share it with someone who needs to feel something real today. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Did Nyara make the right call? Should she have trusted him sooner? This community runs on real voices. Let yours be heard.